Hey everybody, Michael Snyder, your Pacific Northwest Weather Watch. Today is December 21st, and right now we are looking at the current weather here across the Pacific Northwest. You can see places in the interior BC -30 or colder, all the way out to the upper 40s here on the southwest Oregon coast and everywhere in between. You can see the north wind working down the Puget Sound, Willamette Valley into eastern Washington. Very cold temperatures overspreading much of the region here. And east of the Rockies, you can clearly see that north wind marching down across the area here. Some very high pressure setting up here across portions of Montana. Now, diving into things a little bit here, you can see yesterday we had some pretty good snowfall totals, especially up north, some places over a foot. Look at the San Juans really got hammered there as well. And you can see these yellow dots are 5.2 inches plus. You can see some of these totals out here. Even Tacoma came in with about 2 inches. Somebody up there reported that. SeaTac had about 6/10 of an inch. Might have had another couple tenths of an inch overnight. You can see big mountain snows there as well. Looking off the eastern Washington, some nice snow for Spokane there. Ritzville about an inch there as well. Kind of shadowed here, of course, because the rain and snow shadow there through portions of eastern Washington. There was a trace picked up across Portland there, but we are setting the stage for a potential ice storm here across Pacific Northwest. We'll look at that in some detail here in a moment. I wanted to show you guys the all-time record high pressure here for the lower 48 states. You can see this Christmas Eve, 1983. You can actually remember this. A huge windstorm occurred on the west slopes of the Cascades here. I think the wind was gusting over 120 miles per hour. Intense east wind coming out of the mountains here across western Washington. Very powerful storm, and it's spawned by this very high pressure here east of the Rockies shown there. Now taking a look, this is what's coming here by Thursday morning. Not quite as high, but still pretty strong here. We're not going to get the same kind of winds across the area here, but I just wanted to point that out. This is part of that Arctic high that's driving this powerful front across the rest of the country there. Now taking a look at the satellite imagery here, you can see the Pacific storm bearing down on the Pacific Northwest here. It's going to start moving in through Thursday afternoon, night, and on into Friday. Freezing rain potential again across much of the Pacific Northwest here, and then we're going to have a pattern change back to warmer conditions here as we go towards the end of December here. We'll take a look at that coming up here in a moment. Now, taking a look here, this is the European. This is last night's 060 run, so initialized at 10 p.m. If you look on into the future a little bit here, you can see as the system approaches here, some mountain snow, but you can see across the Willamette Valley and some of the coastal range there of Oregon, it's going to start off with some freezing rain. That's this pink here. This is freezing rain. Some snow, Seattle about northward, general model agreement there. And then you can see Portland, Seattle, Olympia. Really intense freezing rain showing up in some of the models here, folks. Mountain snows there. Doesn't look to be as long as an impact of places north. We'll look at some of the soundings there. But then you can see the transition to rain everywhere but guess where? Right there at the gorge opening, and that includes Portland. There's a freezing race, tries to hang on all the way into Friday night and potentially Saturday morning there. And then you can see some of this cold air is going to be trapped in the passes, including Snoqualmie Pass here. And then eastern Washington's going to get on the action as well. Some very cold air will be trapped still in the gorge here. Portions of eastern Washington could get some nice ice accumulations here as you go on in through Saturday night into Sunday morning. Now taking a look here, this is the European. How much freezing rain will accumulate? We're going to speed through here. We are on Wednesday afternoon, Thursday morning here, and you'll see this come up from the south here as we go through Thursday afternoon, starting down towards Eugene and Salem, moving up towards Portland there on the European. You can see it quickly spread northward towards Tacoma and Seattle by this point. This is very early Friday morning here. You're going to want to pay attention to this, especially if you're out and about traveling. This is very disruptive potentially here. Look at some of these totals coming up towards Olympia, over a quarter inch. That would cause power outages, folks. And then you can see Portland getting up more as this continues on. But look at this, a third of an inch of ice in Seattle. This would be extremely disruptive, especially for the airport here. So heads up, folks. And you can see some of the big totals in the gorge here. Portland about a third of an inch. Snoqualmie Pass potentially getting huge freezing rain here. This is going to be an extremely fickle situation, though, and including really anywhere across the Puget Sound as well. The Portland area has a higher confidence of this occurring, but it depends on how the system comes in. These southerly winds are going to be working on the air mass here and trying to scour this out as we go, but you're going to get the reinforcing winds here out of the east for Portland. But you can see the potential is there for a place like Snoqualmie Pass, and then you can see this starts to pile up in eastern Washington as well as we go on in through Saturday. This is as far as the 060 European run goes. Now, taking a look at the winds coming up here, I'll show you why Portland tends to be favored in these situations here. It's Thursday morning. You can see this east wind. This is the sea level gap. It's easy to move cold air back out into the Willamette Valley here, the northern Willamette Valley at least, across Portland. So as you go into Thursday afternoon, you're going to be getting some strong gusty winds coming through the area there. And if you're building ice up when those winds are occurring, it can even make that ice more damaging here as it really weighs on those trees and power lines. And then by the time we go on into Friday morning, you see the winds start to switch southeast and then finally southerly, which will end the freezing rain threat for much of the area across the Puget Sound, but still might be going on here in northern Willamette Valley and Portland by the time you get into Friday night, finally ending by Saturday morning. But there's a lot of cold air trapped in eastern Washington as well, so there's going to be ice potential out there also. Now, this is a 925 millibars, about 2,500 feet off the surface here. So we go through Thursday afternoon, you can see the east winds coming across the area, but then they start to turn southerly as well by the time you go on into Friday morning. So they're going to be just off the surface there, but it's not going to be able to clear out a lot of this low-level sub-freezing air across the Puget Sound and the Willamette Valley here as we go initially on in through Friday morning here. This is what's going to set the stage for this freezing rain event as we go. Now taking a look here, this is the European 24-hour snow total here. So we go into Thursday night, and you can kind of see it favor some snow starting here, Seattle north, picking up some additional snow up towards Skagit, Whatcom County, Vancouver. Going to get a nice, decent snowfall out of this again as you go through very early Friday morning here into Friday afternoon. Mountain snows again. You can see eastern Washington piling up the snow here. Pullman, Spokane, northeast Oregon as well. Maybe even some decent amounts here for central Washington as well, where they're usually a bit more rain shadowed. But you can see not much Seattle south showing up on the European here. Now, taking a look also here, this is the RGEM. I wanted to show you this, another model at least. We'll take a look at accumulating freezing rain inches on this. Put this into motion. You can see that moving its way up towards Portland here. Nice amounts coming for Portland here. Calls for about 1/10 of an inch for Seattle. It would still be disruptive for the airport there. Potential power outages with that. Kind of highlight some of that potential along some of the gaps of the Cascades. But look at these huge amounts across the gorge area here down towards Washington, border with Oregon there, Willamette Valley, some pretty big amounts here on the RGEM model showing. Now this is for the GFS. We have to do our due diligence and take a look at this as well. Accumulating freezing rain, you can see pretty good amounts all the way up towards Seattle. I don't know why it ignores Portland so much here. I think it's out to lunch here, folks, because there's going to be cold air, and I think it's probably just not throwing a lot of precipitation over the region there. But Portland has big ice potential here coming up. Now looking at this is the ice accumulation index shown here, and this takes into account winds too. So you can see once you get higher amounts of ice and higher amounts of wind combined, you get up into the high damage index here, and there's a lot of damage and impact descriptions here on the right. You can see once you get into category 5, you're at catastrophic damage to entire exposed utility systems, including both distribution and transmission networks. Outages could last several weeks. In some areas, shelters would be needed. This is probably not going to occur here, and if it did, it would be extremely localized here, so you'd be able to get help from surrounding areas. But you could be looking at widespread power outages from our situation here coming up across the area, which would also mean extreme travel disruption. Now, taking a look at this, 2012, I found an old image I had. We had about almost a ½ inch accumulation here at my house, Des Moines. This is not far from sea level here, and you can see the ice that accumulated on everything. It actually brought a tree down at work at Alaska Airlines onto my truck while I was at work. So a pretty interesting time there. It was a pretty damaging event there. It damaged some trees around my house as well. Now, taking a look here, this is what's going on. We're looking at the Portland sounding here. So you're looking at a temperature cross section. The red is the temperature, the green is the dew point there, and you can see the winds here on the right. So I'm going to put this into motion. You'll be able to see what's going on here clearly. As we go on into Wednesday night, you can see this low-level temperature air mass here on the surface is very cold for Portland. So we're going to start throwing precipitation over that there. You can see it is above freezing at about, 3,000 feet here to 5,000 feet or higher. You get that area of warmer air aloft. It's going to be rain down into the sub-freezing layer there. And then you can kind of watch this retreat a bit as you go on in through Friday afternoon and evening, and finally goes above freezing, and the freezing rain event will end by this point. This is going on into Friday night at this point as well. But you can see the low-level easterly winds here feeding this low-level cold air mass there with the southerly and southwesterly winds over the top and the warmer air coming in off the Pacific shown there. This is for Seattle. Same thing here. We'll go ahead and speed ahead and just kind of show the same thing. You can see that cold air trapped at the surface. Not quite as much because we don't have the sea level gap there up here across the Puget Sound. But you can see the warm air above, the sub-freezing layer below could be very disruptive for about, looks like between about 3 to 9 hours here across most of the central Puget Sound. But Olympia, Tacoma, down the I-5 corridor, even out towards southwest Washington, has this threat as well. Now, taking a look here at Portland, this is another way to look at it. You can see this warm tongue here as we go on into Thursday afternoon and the very cold sub-freezing layer at the surface there. So you imagine the rain falling through that layer and then freezing on anything it contacts with. Here we go to Salem, same thing here. You can see down into the Willamette Valley, this freezing rain threat is going to exist as well. This would go on into about Friday morning, potentially towards late morning here, according to the European. Now we're taking a look for Seattle, Tacoma here, and you can see not as pronounced, but it is there. This warmer air is going to be moving in above that sub-freezing layer. So just kind of a diagram there. And now look at Bellingham here. You can see it doesn't really have that layer lasting at the surface here. It does stay colder longer than Seattle, of course, but it's going to be more of a snowy situation up here as the air mass is going to be a little bit deeper here. But by the time the warm air moves in, it will also be eroding that lower level freezing layer as well. Now, taking a look at the extended a little bit here, since we're going to go through a pattern change. There goes our system that's depositing all this cold air here across Pacific Northwest. It's the GFS on the right, European on the left. You got Alaska, BC, Washington, Oregon here. This is 18,000 feet, 500 millibars. Put this into motion here. It leaves that cold air around, and then you can see we have a weak system brush us there, and that's going to be that freezing rain potential here. It doesn't even really show up too much here, but it's going to bring that potential there. Now going on to the extended a little bit more, the GFS and the European both have this Gulf of Alaska troughing going, spinning systems through western BC, then potential atmospheric river conditions, even maybe a windstorm, and then you can see additional systems continue to move through the area as we go through the end of December. So we're going to remain active here across Pacific Northwest, but we're going to change the pattern here to more of a wet and windy look as we go on into the new year. Now, taking a look here, I want to look at precipitation or show you guys the precipitation from last night's run. This goes out 10 days. You can see this initial one. This would bring the freezing rain here as we go on in through Thursday night into Friday. And then after that, we warm up across the area. This is west of the Cascades. Actually, it's going to hang on a bit longer as we go through eastern Washington, Oregon, BC, Idaho, Montana as we go. But then we're going to warm up pretty much across the area and even bring places in eastern Washington above freezing. But now looking at the precipitation totals, you can see as we go out to 10 days, you can see some of these big amounts coming across the area here, folks. So we have to start changing our attention to more of an atmospheric river, potential flooding, maybe a windstorm. We'll have to watch and see these systems come in individually as we go. Now, this is 24-hour precipitation coming up here. I just want to kind of show that some of these rainfall makers as we go are pretty big. As you can see, some of these areas are getting 6+ inches in 24-hour periods. So that could cause some flooding concerns. But again, this is a ways out there still. We're out looking here by the end of the weekend coming up here. We'll be able to watch this system day by day as it comes in and highlight any potential problems with that. And you can see the relative rain shadow here across eastern BC, eastern Washington, Oregon as we go. So this is going to be, pretty big rainmaker though for some of the coastal areas here and the Cascades and even in the interior all the way down the Willamette Valley towards Northern California. Now, this is the temperature outlook here. You can see these very cold temperatures. It's going to be a nasty transition as we go through Friday, but it looks like it should be just kind of snow and then stopping and changing to rain there across Bellingham as they warm up. Doesn't look like a huge freezing or rain event up there yet, but we will continue to watch that. That still can change. These systems are very fickle here, and these can be hard to predict. Now, taking a look at Portland here. You can see the cold temperatures there, and then the rapid warm-up coming this weekend on in through Christmas Eve and Christmas, then staying fairly warm through next week, or so things look as of now. Spokane International Airport here. Look at Thursday's high, just around 0 Fahrenheit there, and then the rapid warm-up coming there, even above freezing for some of the overnight lows possible as we go on in through next week. Seattle Tacoma fantasy windstorm hunt here. You can see there are a few members in here with some smatterings of higher winds. Maybe we'll get back into that pattern. We've only had one official windstorm here across the Puget Sound area so far this year, a little bit below average. You usually get a couple by now, but that may be changing coming up. Looking at Quileute, if you want to do a fantasy windstorm hunt out there, you can see a much higher gust here, which is pretty typical for the coastal regions. They get higher winds out there than we generally do in the interior, but you can see the big pattern change coming up here with these gusty winds, warmer temperatures coming up. Now looking at La Nina, here we are looking at the equatorial Pacific. There's Hawaii, there's North America here, here's Japan and Australia, the central Pacific here. Here's the equator. You can see these below average temperatures as La Nina has been dominating. We're still technically in a moderate La Nina, but if you look at the end of the Ren coming up here, you can see November, December 1st, December 10th. Look at some of these little warm pockets coming up here along the coastline there. And this means La Nina is probably starting to wane a bit here. And we've been going on, this is the third season now with La Nina, and it may finally be coming to an end here, folks. And if you take a look at the latest CFS here, this was issued a couple days ago, December 19th. Scroll down a little bit, and you can see the rapid transition. We're in December now, about mid-December here. We should be starting to rapidly come out of La Nina, and by the time we get to February, we may start to move into neutral territory here, and even by the spring and summer, we could be headed toward El Nino conditions. If you look on the right here, this is a map. You can see those blues. I mean, La Nina is still kind of around the central Pacific here, but as you go on into, look at this, July, August, look at this El Nino signature across the equatorial Pacific showing up there. So the model's been pretty good in showing this coming up here, and now it looks like we're starting to see La Nina wane here across the equatorial Pacific. The first stages of it are starting to show up, so that'll be interesting to see if we're headed towards an El Nino next year or if we'll spend the next season in neutral territory. We're just not quite sure yet. But anyway, yeah, the stage is being set here across the Pacific Northwest for this freezing rain event, and this is really going to include portions of eastern Washington as we go through the weekend as well. In Seattle, Olympia, Portland, down towards Salem, Eugene, even out towards the coastline here across southwest Washington, could be in for an ice storm coming up here, including some of the gaps of the Cascades, especially Washington, Oregon, down towards the Gorge. And areas north of Seattle could be picking up a few inches of snow, and even more up towards, the East Vancouver Island area, southwest BC, as well as this system moves in before we change over to some warmer weather here coming up through Christmas and on in through the end of December here. So anyway, yeah, I've got to work today and tomorrow. I'll probably be out documenting the ice storm or where it falls here as we go on in through Friday. I'll try to get some images. Maybe I'll do a live stream as it's occurring. And we have to really watch this closely because these are very fickle. It's just cold air trapped at the surface. And sometimes if the precipitation gets delayed and the southerly winds come in stronger and scour that air mass out, you can avoid the ice storm. Or, of course, we could trend a little bit icier across the region here. And these can be quite memorable. That doesn't happen that often here across Seattle. Portland gets much more since they have the access to the gorge there and that sea level gap off to their east. But it does happen here occasionally. 1996 and 2012 were significant ice storms here across some of the central and southern Puget Sound here. So we might be lining up for another one again here. We'll watch this very closely again tomorrow, and I'll do my standard briefing then. But I hope you guys are having a good day. Thanks to all my new members, my new subscribers. We are up over 2 million views as a channel now, and we're getting close to 16,000 subscribers. So you guys make all this possible. You make it worth my while to come do these every day. So thank you very much, and we will do this again tomorrow, and I'll talk to you then.